Mario Kart World has had some high highs, but also an equal amount of low lows, which I don't want to get into in this video. But something I've heard few people talk about is this game's retro track selection, which, let's just say, is anything but normal. We have a fully remade from the ground up version of N64 Wario Stadium, which absolutely gobsmacks the N64 version and yeets it all the way to the sun, and a redeemed variation of one of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's most hated tracks, this being Sky High Sunday, in the same game where we have Moo Moo Meadows. Again, and yet another SNES Mario Circuit. I'm gonna kill myself! But I think that the most divisive retro track in this game is Choco Mountain. But why? Well, that's exactly what I want to find out. I'd like to look into each variation of this track throughout the ages and compare their aesthetics, plus level design, to see which truly is the best. Welcome to the new and improved Analyzed series, the place where we will pit stages against each other to see who takes the crown. But anyways, let's just get going. Starting off with the original game, Choco Mountain is one of the more unique tracks in this game. Visually, as the name implies, we are in a chocolate-filled valley, which most likely drew inspiration from the Choco Island tracks from Super Mario Kart, which were direct homages to the very same stages found in Super Mario World. And unlike Super Mario Kart, the chocolate actually looks like chocolate, instead of looking like something else, which also looks brown and sticky. Oh, and also the skybox is a little misty. Maybe that's just something they added to avoid popping, but ended up being a stylistic decision associated with this track. And the music is pretty good too. For N64, it's pretty fun. But this is the moment where we get into the track design, which is where things get weird. We begin in a very tight corridor. On the right we have a chocolate wall, but on the opposite side we have a fully covered brick wall for apparently no reason. If you ram into it, or any wall for that matter, you will lose control over your kart. After a quick drive forward, you enter a tunnel with not much going on. Then you do a few turns and end up in a moat, boulders falling down. In lower difficulties and in time trials, there's a guardrail preventing the player from falling into the water, but in 100cc and over, this guardrail is gone. So if for some reason you do fall off, you have to redo a portion of this track, which is balls. If I'm in a bit of a memey mood, it's fine. However, if I'm in a no nonsense, no bullshit state of mind, hell nah, that's a stupid idea the developers added. Who made this? Snoop Dogg? But after that, we get into the final section with two big ramps that mean nothing because we're playing a game without a trick mechanic. Huzzah! For Mario Kart 64 standards, this track is mostly fine. It's a very middle of the road track, which kept the small details at a minimum, with the exception of a couple of billboards and signs on the side of the track. However, my biggest issue with this track has to do with this game's physics. Whenever you crash into a heavily steep surface, the player tumbles back down and loses all their speed and momentum, which is a huge detriment on this game's part, with such potent rubber banding, which for any simpletons out there, it's the mechanic where the further you're ahead of the pack, the faster the CPUs will become in order to keep the race entertaining, in quotation marks. But that's not my only problem. You see, these ramps near the end of the track, yeah, they don't serve much of a purpose in this game. In more recent games you can trick off of these, but without a trick system, these ramps just serve to annoy the player. Plus, with the little air movement the game provides you, it becomes a very uncomfortable task, and you don't really feel in control. And for my final critique, this track does not work well with Mario Kart 64's drift system. Most Mario Karts have a tighter drift system, which in real life would equate to a forward-wheel drive car, which can comfortably take tight turns in narrow paths. But in Mario Kart 64, this drift system would equate to a rear-wheel drive kart, which struggle in narrow environments, which this track has an abundance of, and that's really bad. Granted, that's a problem with this game specifically rather than the track itself, but to accommodate that, they mostly built tracks wide enough to solve that issue. But here, they were smelling bath salts or something. I mean, look at this, my god, this is not fun, I'm sorry. But that leads us to Mario Kart DS. Now at first sight, this looks like an exact copy from the N64 version. It's got the chocolatey vibe, it's got the falling boulders, it's got the jumps, it's got the mist, it's got that house. It's all here and accounted for. Visually, it's a bit downscaled, so it can actually fit on a cartridge. But for all intents and purposes, this is Choco Mountain. But I'm glad to say that all these problems I had for the N64 version are gone. No stupid bonk system. This game actually knows how to make good skinny tracks, and that leap of faith is way less likely to f you. But a part of me misses the bullshit the N64 version had. It kind of had personality. But hey, I'm not going to slander something that's competently made compared to something that isn't that. So that means that the DS version is a good recreation in my eyes, but we still cannot trick off of these, my god. But for the standards of DS retro tracks, this is like the Mona Lisa compared to these crimes against humanity. And one final thing, the music has stayed mostly the same, which is fine. It's not a glamorous remake, but it's very functional. But yeah, this is a glow up if I've ever seen one. Remember Wave 1? Dark times, I know. But Choco Mountain was one of the few bright spots the first BCP wave had. Choco Mountain got a full-on reimagining, and you can tell how graphically upgraded it became. It's almost night and day. This remake actually makes its name justice, and looks like an actual mountain range. We can clearly see we're high above sea level, very far away from any notable landmarks, or even a small town, which gives off a very isolating feeling. But remember about this residence? Well, that stupid thing actually got turned into a mine with diamonds and shy guys cheering you on. This is a very fitting way to evolve the track without making it too out there. Trust me, we'll get into that later on. I like how they added a small shortcut here, and also there's bats entering and leaving the cave. After that, we get a pretty fun glider section where you can see what looks like a wrecked bridge, which increases the stakes a bit, even if the whole track has a mostly cheery and upbeat vibe. The moat section has been shortened, and it's no longer possible to fall off the track without Lakitu being an overbearing helicopter parent, which is fine. I liked how DS did it a bit better, as you could fall off it if you felt like it, but you'd still have good controls. Though I'm sad to say that the boulders, which are synonymous with this track, have been relegated to nothing but a background asset. They spawn way less frequently, they cannot harm the player, and they no longer have a chocolatey tint to them, like in its previous versions. They're just the same rocks from the base game, which is just a bit bothersome to me. And also, this smoke cannot be driven on, even though driving underwater is one of this game's main mechanics. But all's forgiven, because now we can trick off of these. Hooray! Oh, and also the music got a very fitting upgrade. It sounds way less compressed and less like a video gamey music. By the way, on its own, that is not a bad thing, but compare this to this and you'll hear a substantial difference. Hell, even the funny billboards are back. That's how you know they truly cared. No, but in all honesty, this is another solid remake of Choco Mountain, which is leagues better than the N64 version, but suffers from some small blemishes which could be ironed out in the next game. I'd consider this the best variant so far, but the DS version isn't far behind. But what do we have next? You know how Choco Mountain's supposed to be a mountain? Well, I guess Mario Kart World didn't get the memo, and so we're left with this. A stadium track with mild mountain elements, but really basic ones like rocks, plants, mud, the sort. Don't get me wrong, this stage does look great, but this is not Choco Mountain, and somehow, even though this remake technically has more jumps, it's way flatter than every other version. We're no longer exploring a high altitude environment, which is everything this track strived not to do. Before we get into the gameplay, let's just look at the track settings plus its set pieces. We can clearly see a huge change in direction here. There's a huge crowd cheering everyone here on the stadium grid, which is a radical departure from every other version. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe did have NPCs cheering you, yeah, but that felt a little bit more natural and gave off an adventurous feeling, which is sadly mostly gone here. In a sizable chunk of this track, you drive on top of metal, with mostly flat plains until the very end, where you do get some notable elevation changes. The tunnel section got changed into a gateway, and we do get Mario World enemies here, the charging chucks. I'm okay with their addition, as they're a fitting inclusion to a track like this. They even throw their American footballs. After all these flat lands, we get near the end of the track, close to the edge of a hill, with fireworks and billboards on the side. Now this is what I'd always wanted. More of this, please. Oh no. Unfortunately, the fun part of this track got cut short for no apparent reason, so we're left with this. Not the greatest showing, but maybe the gameplay could redeem it. And I've got to say, no? But let's be fair here. I've only played this game at a friend's house, so I just want you to know that this is more of a first impressions take on this track, rather than my fully fledged opinion. Gameplay wise, this track is fine. Choco Mountain didn't get that many sections which benefited from Mario Kart World's parkour mechanics. Therefore, there's not a lot of cool things you can do here, and you can mostly only do shroom skips. The falling boulders are still pretty easily dodgeable, but I like how the charging chucks can both run around the stage and knock you over. And I do appreciate how wide the track has become to compensate for the added 24 players. Some ramps are mildly fun to take, and the final 3 jumps show a spark. A small glimmer into what could have been if this track was more of a faithful reinterpretation of the original track. Graphically, yeah, this is pretty good. No complaints here. But you know what? Even though I'm a little split on the change of setting, the music that accompanies this track is absolute gas. all in all, I'm going to put this track in between the DS version and the Booster Course Pass version. Even with all these complaints, World has way better controls than DS, and I'd still say this track is better by virtue of having the better controls out of the two, but DS is only a smidge worse. It's such a small difference that I'd say, depending on the day, you might prefer one over the other, and vice versa. But comparing these two, I think that we can all agree that the 8 version is the most faithful to the original while being the most fun. Anyways, why do people hate this track so much? Well, my best guess as to why is due to the huge change in setting, plus its recent addition in the Boost Course Pass, which might have took the spot from another bigger and better track. Some people might have grown attached to the traditional look of this track and might find its new version jarring, which is perfectly reasonable, and some others might think the opposite. But anyways, what do you think about this? Which version of this track is the best and all that fun stuff? But anyways, I'ma head out.